Welcome to She's the Man podcast. My name's Faith. I'm going to be your host for this episode, and today we're going to be chatting with Fela Davis. Fela Davis is co-owner of 23DB Productions and One of One Production Studios based out of Fort Lee, New Jersey. Her mobile recording clients include Atlantic Records, Live Nation, SiriusXM Radio, and more. She's a graduate of Full Sail University with nearly 20 years of experience in audio engineering. Her past experiences include working with industry powerhouses Claire Broadcast and House of Blues. When she's not recording podcasts and bands at her One of One Production Studios, she's mixing front of house engineer for 6-time Grammy Award-winning jazz artist Christian McBride. Hi, Fela. I'm so excited to have you.
Doing good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm so glad to have you on this episode because I remember meeting you a couple of months ago at the Sound Girls conference where you were a speaker, and I learned so much from you. So I'm so excited to have you on our podcast to share with our audience.
Fantastic. Yes.
So I have a couple of questions. I don't know if we're going to get to all of them, but we are going to try. But I really just want to hear about your story in the industry. So I just want to know, how did you even get started in this industry, and like what was the deciding factor that made you say this is what I want to do with my life? Like, how did you get started in audio?
I have an interesting story. I knew I wanted to do audio since the 8th grade. I took a career placement test and it had audio engineering.
Oh my gosh, no way.
Yes, I wanted those weird people that knew what they wanted to do from like 13. So from there, it was just like, oh, okay. I started doing my research on it, and fast forward to 10th grade, I'm in band, and I'm in the band room, and I see this magazine that says careers in music, not playing music. Like it was something like that. So it was like audio engineering schools, basically. I was like, oh my God, yes, here it is. Because at the time, I mean, this was like the late 90s. So the internet was not nearly what it is now. So it was very hard to find information on engineers, on what it did. There was no Google to like see people doing it or talk about it. I remember when I was in the 8th, 9th grade getting Mix Magazine, and that thing was like $12. It was like a birthday present to get. So that, so in the 10th grade, I see this magazine in Full Sail University. Well, at the time it wasn't even university yet. It was just Full Sail.
Oh, wow.
I found it in this magazine, and I'm like, oh wow, this is in Orlando. Nice. And then like a few months later, I talked my mom and my sister into visiting the campus, and I'm in the 10th grade. And once I visited the campus, that was it. Like they had the Neve board there. It was like all the stuff you see on MTV and all the VT, like,
Oh my gosh.
It was all the gear you wanted to see. So I was like, here is where I want to go. And then, a lot of the alumni were all the stuff you were listening to at the time. I mean, it was just like, how can I not go here? So from there, in the 10th grade, I knew I wanted to go to Full Sail. So that was it. I finished up high school. A few months after graduating from high school, I went straight into Full Sail. And that was pretty much the beginning of everything. Did my time there, graduated, and at this time it was only a year long. So it was just like a whirlwind, because I mean, I knew what I wanted to do, but I'm from a small town in South Carolina. You may hear the accent. That the arts wasn't a thing. Everything was very sports based, which I played sports. I played basketball, a track team, all of that sort of thing. So
I'm from Mississippi, so I got
that.
Yeah.
I'm into that too. And I was actually really good at sport. So I actually excelled. So I was pretty popular because of that. But I also knew that I didn't want to do that long term. So I knew I wanted to be an audio engineer. So I started really concentrating on that and taking that to the next level. And it was like, where can I get the best learning experience for this? And I felt like at the time, especially Full Sail, I don't know if I would do it now because it's so much information.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like going to Harvard though, going to Full Sail.
Wow.
Because the connections to so many other things, it may be worth it even for the networking. So to think about it that way, because you still need connections in this business. So you can still build it up yourself, but you know, at this time in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was just no other way to kind of learn about being an audio engineer. And at first I just wanted to do studio. But while I was
recording studio.
I wanted to be in the recording studio, and I went for recording arts. I love that. Like the third or fourth month, we had the live sound course, and I was like, oh, this is what I like. I like people enjoying it. It won't sit on a shelf. It's either you get it done or, you know, I like that complete finish at the end of the night. Studio just didn't give me that. It was just like, oh, okay, well, this may hit the airwaves or it may never, you know, see the light of day. So that was a big turn on for me. And you got paid immediately. that was a big thing for live. I mean, because, you know, when you're a stagehand, you're getting paid to do this certain thing and you're learning. So I couldn't do like 4 or 5 months at a studio with no pay. And I mean, this was in the time that was still, it's not as much of a thing now, but I mean, they would have interns for long periods of time. In like the 90s, you know, or even the 80s, you know, if you go back, you know, it'll be like a year sometimes. So I needed to make money from this immediately. So that was how I got into live sound.
Yeah. You have had quite the career. You've done a lot of things in live sound and touring and all these different things. Like, but I could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Right out of Full Sail, I had to go back home to my small town because I was dead broke, like most college students are. Well, you know, once you graduate, it's like, okay, you got a degree, but it's like, you know, nothing. You don't have it. Like you have nothing behind you. It's like the college thing, you know, it's like, okay, now you got to get a job and figure this out. So, one of my first gig was actually hired by an alumni of Full Sail as well.
Oh, that's
and
great.
It's in South Carolina. But South Carolina is very seasonal. And when I graduated in September, everything like dies into the fall because it's a very tourist heavy state. During, you know, the peak season is from Memorial Day to Labor Day in South Carolina, basically. And that's when all the shows are happening. So I kind of had to just work regular crappy jobs. Like I was folding airbags and deboning chickens and doing all these weird gigs. In South Carolina, because, you know, I had to go back home. So there was no real industry there. It was just manufacturing in this town. So I was doing like all these kind of factory jobs. In between that, I was going to like Charlotte, Myrtle Beach, like all the bigger towns that I could get work in, taking my resumes. Myrtle Beach ended up working out. I ended up working at House of Blues and Legends in Concert. And I just started working at all the venues I could work at. I pretty much kind of figured out what I liked in South in like Myrtle Beach. Cause I even worked at an ESPN radio station, and a CBS affiliate news station. So I was doing cameras as well. So, I mean, I was doing all of these jobs to just pay rent, you know, to barely, still barely
Yeah.
pay rent. Cause I mean, board ops and radio make like $6 an hour or something. It was just like all of these nickel and dime gigs, but in production, and I was still learning. So
Yeah.
it was like, okay, I don't, but I was learning what I did and didn't like.
Yeah.
Oh, I do like live. And I think this is my thing. I don't really like news stations. It's bad news all the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, radio doesn't pay unless you're a jock, unless you're on air. So I was just like, I don't want to do none of those. So like the live stuff, I really was like, I got to get to this. So that was like a year and a half period of just doing all of these random things in production. And still narrowing down that, I love live.
Yeah.
And
Like
so
getting your feet wet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, House of Blues like that, but it's very seasonal. So, I was like, I can't go on unemployment every time it's down season. And that's what the employers are doing. I was like, I'll never pay off student loans this way. So so I was like, I gotta move. So I started thinking like, where do I go? And then it just so happened that a friend of mine that I was working with at the news station was dating somebody down in Fort Lauderdale. And we went down there one weekend and I had a blast, and I just saw where I could spread my wings in the live thing, because it was a lot more opportunity. So it was interesting because that was the year of like all of those hurricanes, like Katrina went through.
Oh God.
And so the day I moved down there, me and my roommate moved down there like 3 days after like one of those major hurricanes in October. So we didn't even have power for the first like week that I was there. But that was where I really cut my teeth, and I started working at Revolution, which is in downtown Fort Lauderdale. And they booked pretty much the same acts that would come into the House of Blues. They were just trekking down to Revolution. I was like, and that was where I started off as a stagehand, but then I became a monitor engineer. And I learned that, but I knew I still wanted to do front of house. But yeah, I just worked everywhere that would let me mix. If you didn't let me mix, I just didn't work it, and that was, you kind of have to do that when you want to get a specific thing. When you realize, this is what I want, you have to only take those gigs. And, and those aren't going to be the best paying. It was sometimes that I could have gotten paid more doing stagehand stuff, but it was like, no, let me take less pay because this is going to put me into what I want to do. So from there, I really started going hard at mixing front of house and like going to every venue, and, and pretty much I worked everywhere I could in the 4 years that I was in South Florida. I worked at Arturo Sandoval's Jazz Club and just a bunch of Parker Playhouse, a bunch of really good venues that I really got to mix all types of bands. And that was where I really got to learn how to mix like everything. Like you had Latino bands, Hispanic, like all the whole Latin nation, and then you had hip hop, and you had Haitian, compa music. It was all of these things. So that was where I was like, okay, this is where I really learned. But 4 years I had worked everywhere, and that was when I had to make the move to either New York or LA, and I chose to stay on the East Coast. So that's why I've been here, and this will be 13 years now.
Wow, cool.
In May. It'll be 13 years here. So and so the growth from there into what I'm doing now in the podcasting.
Yeah. Well, can I ask, during your journey, like through Full Sail and through some of the career experiences that you had. I'm wondering if during some of those experiences, if you felt underrepresented as a woman in the industry, and if so, how you overcame it.
Um, eh, it was
Did you see other women like working alongside you as a stagehand or even in mixing?
No,
Really? Yeah.
no. I mean, and even here in New York, you would have thought it would be
Mm.
a lot more women mixing.
Yeah.
It wasn't as many as I thought it would be. It's a few of us, but yeah, we're far and in between, and a lot of those women are kind of on Broadway more so than like the hard, like mixing heavy music, you know. I just kept out there. I knew that I would never see anybody that looks like me doing what I do. It's just, it's not something that a lot of people that look like me want to do too. Not that it was something holding us back from it. It was just that it's not a thing that's in our culture, you know, in my culture to do that, to be in front of it. People always think I'm performing. They see me backstage like, you play keys or something. I'm like, no, I'm like, no, I'm the engineer. So yeah, you know, I mean, you know, I just kept on going. I never really let that bother me either way. Because yeah, it's just not too many people who do what I do that look like me. So, you know, sometimes, okay, I could feel like, oh, I didn't get a gig because of that, but that usually wasn't a gig that I wanted to do in the long term anyway.
You're right.
You know,
would you want it to have worked for people?
Yeah,
like that?
Why would I want to be? Yeah, why would I want to be on that team? So thank you both ways on not hiring me. So it really worked out. So
yeah,
I still ended up working at a lot of the places that people thought I wouldn't ever work at, like Claire and play. You know, like nobody thought I would get that gig. You know, but man, you know it. You just have to be out there, and you have to be in places that's possible for the opportunity. And that's why you come to big cities like here or LA or something like that. It's for the opportunity, because after a while, you just need somebody that can do the gig. and it's just like, whoever, she can do it, cool. and that's it. That, you know, it's as simple as that sometimes. So, you know, if sometimes I am the last resort, which I felt like I was for a lot, it was like, oh, we don't have anybody else. And then it was just me. Oh. Okay. But that was my foot in the door. Then they were like, oh, you are good. You know, and then it was like, yeah, I know. All I need is a chance. And yeah. So, and you know, and I got that sort of chance through Christian McBride, and he found me online.
Really?
He found me through LinkedIn.
Really? I didn't know that. Oh my God.
Yeah. So
you've toured all over with him.
Yeah.
You've gone like international with him, right?
Exactly.
Oh my God.
All the continents.
Wow. That's
yeah.
incredible.
Africa, Asia, Australia, New Zealand, everywhere I ever wanted to go.
That's amazing.
And that was because I put out there what I did online. I started posting like mixes of what I was doing. You didn't have to guess, what does she do for a living, you know. And the fact that I put up so much content analytically on all of these platforms, it puts you ahead of even people that has more experience than you, but they're not putting it out there.
So you just started posting videos online, and it got attention as well.
And I created a YouTube channel, and I started just resharing links and put a good headshot picture up and doing all the stuff at the time. And this was 10 years ago. Doing all the stuff at the time that nobody else was doing. And LinkedIn wasn't what it is now. Nobody really knew if it was going to stay or not. But also my school, Full Sail, their like career development, I was like, you really need to get your LinkedIn together. And I was like, who's looking at this thing? Like what everybody thinks, like who's going to get a job in engineering through through a LinkedIn or something like that. But I was like, you know what? I was in New York and I realized, hey, if I can show up at the top in New York, you never know. Because at the time, LinkedIn was literally ranking everybody by numbers.
Wow.
2. They stopped doing this years ago.
Oh, okay.
But at the time, they used to rank you literally by the number. And it was like, okay, top New York City front of house engineer. Boom. I knew I was showing up number 1. So I was like, oh, okay. If somebody's randomly looking, you never know. 8 months later, boom, I got a DM from Christian McBride. He now a 7-time Grammy Award winner, actually.
That is
and
amazing.
He was like, hey, I'm looking for an audio engineer and I'm going to be going to Curacao. I got some international dates and, have you mixed a big band? And funny enough, I had. I had mixed some big bands. In Miami, like some Latin, like big bands with Arturo Sandoval. And then I had done some stuff even in Brooklyn. So, mixing him wasn't nerve wracking. It was just like, woo, finally the opportunity. Yeah. And when you deal with an artist like that, you get the best of the best. You get the boards you want. You get the microphones you want. So everything sounds good. So, it just makes everything easier when you're dealing with somebody of that caliber and you don't have to beg for everything. It's like, oh, no, we know they're Grammy Award winner. What do you need? It's like, instead of like working with a bag of 57s every night. 57s are good, but if you want a good mix, you have to have more diversity in like your sonic sound. Yeah. And I got most of that learning from Claire because they had every microphone on the planet. So I was taking gear from like Florence and the Machine would be on Good Morning America, and I'd have like the compressor that was on Florence's voice at a $50 gig I was doing in Brooklyn. But I was learning how all of these pieces of gear work, like outboard gear, everything. I knew what the top people were using already, and I would just use it on my gigs. And so when I got his gig, I was ready. It wasn't even like, oh, what kind of mics do I want? I knew exactly what I wanted. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So that's why I'm like, pick up these side gigs and learn from them.
Yeah.
They may be really crap jobs sometimes, but the learning factor, I'm so glad I had that year with this top gear that was literally being seen on broadcast television. And then I was using it on other gigs through my boss saying that I could, because I was getting paid so little hourly. Because at this time I was just doing like warehouse work. So, but I was learning. And then it all helped when I started working for a 7-time Grammy Award winner.
That is absolutely incredible. Congrats for everything. Seriously. I've learned so much from everything you've had to say. Like, your story is incredible. And just before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask, what like a little nugget of advice would you have for anybody, beginners? Right now I'm in my senior year. I'm in my final semester of college, about to go out to the world. What little nugget of advice would you have for us beginners, like just starting in the industry?
I enjoy the ride. Because it's gonna be like peaks and valleys, and what am I doing?
Yeah.
But you just have to trust the journey of what you want to do, and be very defining what is going to make you happy in this work, in what you're doing. Now I'm not even touring anymore, actually, since the pandemic. I'm in my studio right now, where we do podcasting now for like iHeartRadio and Black Effect Network and the Charlemagne the God.
Amazing. I absolutely love that you pivoted during the pandemic, you were able to pivot. And
I mean, I was doing it anyway, because we had gotten, this is a bigger space than our initial. But it was like, I had to make that break because it was too much going on to come back to a business and then be like, well, where are we at? So I had to stay here. And then it just so happened that the pandemic happened. But I had told Christian that I wasn't going to go out like right in 2020, right before. And that was like, 7 years straight. I was like in Europe every year,
Wow,
So now just growing my own thing. And I mean, when I was just graduating like you, nobody even knew what podcasting was. So you just take the ride. Who knows?
It's going to evolve.
What I'm doing now, I couldn't have even imagined this. Now. But learning all these pieces of audio, whether it was through doing radio and doing, for news stations and for music, I've been able to combine all of this. So I'm working on, this is my camera. I got our 4K camera. We got an upright piano in here. I get to combine everything that I've learned over these 20 years. So enjoy every part of it. And if you're not, move on. You're young. Keep going. It's like you can pivot at any time. Like, nah, I don't like the way this, I don't like this. So you can move. Always keeping it moving. That's the main nugget I tell to anybody young, and go after it. Don't get scared. It's scary, but keep going. Keep going. It's so because it's so worth it.
Yeah.
I would have never imagined what I'm doing now as a entrepreneur and stuff if I wouldn't have never just gone after it as an audio engineer. And now I'm pivoting into a whole business now. So yeah. And then if anybody wants to get in touch with me or interested in learning how to do this as well, you can check us out at info at oneofoneproductions.com. Or you can go on our website, oneofoneproductions.com. And, we talk about everything, podcasting, all that sort of thing. So, yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Fela, for coming on the She's the Man podcast. And we'll see you next time.